Hi, I'm Josh McGrath.
I'm Andrew Haas.
And this is the Ardent Pursuit Podcast. In our last episode, we gave you 2 pieces of homework to apply. Number 1, don't be an idiot. I'm telling you, gentlemen, if you just don't be an idiot, your life will be so much easier and everyone around you will be blessed. However, if you struggled with that simple task, we gave you something a bit more specific, which was, if you want to pursue a romantic relationship before you initiate anything, take that idea and present it to your authority and to your accountability. Give them the opportunity to say not now or not her. So hopefully you all did that this week, because today we're going to talk about what should you be looking for in a woman that you want to pursue. You know, I'm excited about this topic. And here at the Ardent Pursuit podcast, our goal is to equip single men to be initiators of romantic relationships that do lead towards flourishing marriages. And because that's our heart, one of the things that we're going to do today is we're going to look at the qualities and characteristics that men really should be looking for in a potential spouse, in a woman that they're interested in pursuing.
And we've all heard of the proverbial list.
Yes, absolutely.
You may even have one.
I may have one. I can neither confirm nor deny.
Could be a short list.
It could be.
Could be a long list.
It probably is not.
And what we're here to do today is to suggest what should be on that list.
Yes, because as we know, both men and women do create lists. And instead of just creating a list and being like, this is what I want, we want to make sure that what is on that list is going to help set them up for success. Not just in their dating relationship, but ultimately should they get married one day. And so today we're going to look at 3 particular categories that we actually examined for men back in episode 5, which was titled How to Determine Whether You're Ready for a Relationship. And the 3 categories we're going to look at today are spiritual maturity, emotional maturity, and relational maturity. And these are things that, again, for a Christian man, we are going to say these should be part of your list. So let's dive in. Spiritual maturity. So there's 5 things under here that we've identified. Number 1, does she love Jesus? Number 2, is she involved in her local church beyond simply attending Sunday morning? Number 3, does she regularly read the Bible? Number 4, is she under authority, pastoral or parental? Number 5, does she have mentors and accountability? So I want to start here with number 1. Does she love Jesus? This is so important, but it's kind of a very broad category we've put, right? Does she love Jesus? Like, what does that look like? If you come from a healthy local church framework, if you understand scripture and theology, if you've grown up in a healthy community, you have a clear idea of what this looks like. However, there are many women out there who would say they love Jesus, but the fruit of their life does not demonstrate a life that loves Jesus. And so when we're talking about, loving Jesus, we're talking about something more than just saying, I love Jesus.
And from the guy's side of it, he should be able to answer it more definitively than I think so or probably. If that's his perception of where she is at spiritually, pause.
Yes, and some of these other subcategories here are kind of ways that you can determine that she does love Jesus. For instance, number 2, is she involved in her local church beyond simply attending Sunday morning? If the woman that you're interested in pursuing only attends church on a Sunday morning, and that's the extent of her investment in church life and church community, like that's concerning. Because hopefully she's invested in a small group or a Bible study. Hopefully she's invested in some type of other church ministries, midweek ministries. Hopefully she's invested in outreaches to the community. And again, I know there's a season and time for everything, so this won't be every season. But hopefully as you're observing her life, you're seeing evidence of that beyond just simply attending on a Sunday morning.
Because a lot of guys would be happy with that.
Yes.
They'd think they have a total catch if there's this great girl. She goes to church every week.
Dude, men are so simple. They're like, oh my gosh, dude, there's a girl and she loves Jesus. And I'm like, well, how do you know? I see her in church. I'm like, oh, unbelievers attend church all the time, just so you know. But it's true. No, you're totally right. And then again, number 3 here, does she regularly read the Bible? This is going to be evidence of a woman who loves Jesus. And again, these are all categories that women should apply to men.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so is she reading her Bible? And this is something that's so interesting because, like, a lot of Christians in the Western world say they love Jesus or they'll attend church, but then when you begin to ask them about their time with the Lord, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I pray." And I'm like, "Okay, great. But what about like your quiet time?" "Oh yeah, I love to be quiet and still before the Lord." "Okay, great. Well, all right. What about reading the Bible?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, I read that on Sundays at church." And I'm like, "Okay." Or, "Yeah, I'm in a Bible study." I'm like, "Great. But what about you and Jesus? What about you in the Word? What does that look like on a daily level?" And so one of the things that like is of huge importance and significance that will help shape and frame a relationship in a marriage is if the woman and the man especially, but like right now we're talking about women, is in the Word. And you want to be pursuing a woman who is in the Word. That is so important. Number 4 and 5, here, is she under authority and does she have mentors and accountability? Again, depending upon community, church life, involvement herself, she may not. But really kind of those first, 3, does she love Jesus? Is she involved in her local church beyond just attending Sunday morning? And does she read her Bible regularly? Those are very important. And I would say number 1, does she love Jesus, is non-negotiable.
And a point of clarity too, for the ones lower down the list there, if they exist, those are great indicators.
Yeah.
If they don't exist, doesn't mean that something's wrong necessarily.
Yep.
It just means you got to spend a little more time figuring things out.
So let's go to the second category here. What do we got?
Yeah, emotional maturity. This is something that guys often aren't that in tune with.
Yeah, both in themselves or
Yes.
others.
We aren't that good at observing it.
Yes.
And being aware of it.
Yes.
Or even demonstrating it ourselves.
Completely.
But this is something guys need to be or should purpose to be better at. With emotional maturity, simply, is she emotionally mature? Another way to put that, does she process information and events in a mature, sound, and grounded way? Both within herself, how she responds, but then also, how does she react to the world around her?
Yeah. And sometimes, because of the cultural climate that we live in, when you begin to talk about women and emotions, people, ironically, can become very emotional about it. They can become very touchy about it. And it's like, what, are you just anti-woman? Do you think, men are just better because they're not as emotional? And that's not what this is about. Emotions are created by God. And, they make great servants, terrible masters. But really what we're saying here is like, look, it is so important that a woman be emotionally mature. Why? Because oftentimes men aren't as emotionally mature. We know this historically, that women mature faster and often more so than a lot of men. So it's really important that she be emotionally mature. And like you said, what does that look like? It can look like many different ways. There's no one way. But I loved how you put it, that does she process information and events in a mature, sound, and grounded way? Is she prone to drama when something happens? Is she prone to just falling apart when the unexpected occurs? Is she prone to being, just kind of irrational and just responding solely through an emotional lens during times of crisis? Or is she willing to take in information, theology, cultural, logical information to help inform her view?
And you kind of alluded to it earlier, do her emotions control her, or does she have a handle on her emotions?
Yeah.
And it's not one or the other.
Of course not.
But how does she handle, emotions are good. They help express, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yes.
How she handles that within herself can be a really good thing, or it can be a harmful thing.
It can. And one thing to know that, sometimes men don't realize is that, emotions that are shepherded are really a beautiful thing. I think we'll get to this in a later episode where we'll unpack this more. But the beauty of the masculine kind of stepping into that feminine round is it really does help to shepherd and shield emotions in a way that really then they're able to be expressed in a very God, fearing, beautiful way. Now let's look at number 2 here. Does she communicate in a mature way? I'll unpack that one for me.
Well, personally, when I was interested in my wife, something that I noted pretty early on was her ability to communicate to me on a friend level, even as feelings were developing. And I didn't really have the tools or the understanding of what I was actually looking for, but it was something that I noticed and really appreciated. That even as we were developing a friendship and later a relationship, she had the maturity to still talk to me as a friend on a friendship level, and not just in the I'm an interested party, flirting and all of that.
Yeah.
That so quickly becomes the dominant tone
Yes.
of a relationship.
It's true. And, we get to this in a later episode, but, clear, effective communication is essential to the success of any relationship. Whether that's a romantic relationship, whether that's a marriage, whether that's a coworker relationship, whether you're just trying to, customer service, return a package and get a refund. Clear, effective communication is so important. And so a woman who can communicate in a mature way is so very valuable and will help to set up that relationship to be successful. And then should you get married, sets you up for success in your marriage. Number 3, is she willing to receive correction from her authority and mentors? We talked about this in episode 5 with men. The fact that if men are not willing to receive correction from authority, mentors, accountability, then you're not ready for a relationship.
Yeah.
And in the same way here, when you look at a woman, you want to be pursuing a woman who is open to receive correction, who postures herself in a place of not saying, I know it all, but of eagerness to learn and to grow.
Yeah, being able to receive correction and feedback from a mentor, even a peer, can be a really good sign. Someone who has the humility and self-awareness to understand I won't always have all the right answers or always act in the appropriate way.
Yeah.
And how they respond to that is really helpful.
It is. So let's get to our third category here, relational maturity. 5 things we've noted here. Number 1, does she have a community of people that know her, that love her, and that regularly invest in her? Number 2, does she only hang out with people her own age or who are in the same season of life? Or does she have multi-generational friendships? Number 3, is she actively investing in others in her community or only receiving investment from others? Number 4, does she have a relationship with her family? And if so, what does that look like? Is it healthy? And number 5, what are her views on children and family? So let's start with number 1 here. Does she have a community of people that know her, that love her, and that regularly invest in her?
Hopefully, that's kind of best case scenario.
Of course.
Not always the case.
Yep.
And you can navigate that, right? Not a deal breaker. But if that exists, that's a really good thing.
Yes. And based upon season of life, a geographical location, sometimes you're in a place or in a space where you're not actually able to have that type of community. We're fortunate that we come from a very healthy community where we've experienced this for decades. But that's not true for everyone from every place. And that kind of leads to number 2. Does she only hang out with people her own age or who are in the same season of life, or does she have multi-generational friendships? There are times that, people are, even if they're involved in a local church, maybe in a church that is predominantly just young people or single people. At which point it is hard to build those multi-generational friendships. And so if a woman doesn't have that, that's not a deal breaker.
Right.
Again, like you said, that's best case scenario.
And it can also point to how they, just how they approach life.
Of course.
We naturally gravitate, guys and girls, toward, what we're familiar with, toward our peers, toward what we know. That's just human nature. But someone who can push back against that and interact with, on a more than a superficial level, people outside of your social circles and outside of your age range. Those are all really good things.
Yes. So number 3 here, is she actively investing in others in her community or only receiving investment from others? This is, it's funny. It reminds me of how, a lot of guys will, approach me, either if they're interested in a girl or once they've started dating her. And I'll ask them, okay, what is it about her that you're attracted to? And if at some point along the conversation, they don't happen to mention something like the way she loves others, the way she serves others, or the way she cares for others, I just kind of make mental note of that. Because for anybody that you're pursuing, man or woman, hopefully in their life, it demonstrates that they are actively investing in others, that they're actively caring and loving and serving others. Because if they're doing that in their life for others, then they're going to do that for you.
Because you know what's really hard to deal with? Someone who is self-centered. And you know what happens over time? We all become more self-centered over time.
Of course.
Unless you push back against it.
Yep.
So if someone isn't pushing back against that pretty much from the get-go, 10, 20 years down the road, people just become more self-centered, and being in a relationship with someone like that is very challenging.
That's such a good point, because I've heard time and time again, you see this both on the internet and in real life, where you'll hear from somebody and they'll just talk about their single journey, right? And how it's so hard to be single, and how do you deal with the loneliness, and how do you deal with this and that? And I'm like, how do you deal with it? What is wrong with you? Like, how are you even lonely? Let me guess, you're not investing in others. So much of your life is spent actually just you. I don't have time to sit around and think about being lonely. Why? Because I'm spending my time investing in the kingdom. I'm spending my time investing in others. And so as a man who may be looking for a potential wife, what you want to be doing is saying, hey, do I see a woman out there who's investing in others? And she should be saying, hey, is he out there investing in others?
Yes.
This is so important. Next, does she have a relationship with her family? And if so, what does that look like? Is it healthy? This one can be complicated because unfortunately the family structure is so broken in America.
Yeah.
And so while ideally the woman you're interested in has a great relationship with her parents, the reality is that unfortunately many marriages are broken, and as a result, parental relationships with kids are broken. And so just because a woman may not have a good relationship with her family does not mean that she's not someone to pursue.
Yes.
There are a lot of really godly, amazing women out there who come from very broken home environments.
Yeah.
And so again, that's just something to either learn and explore and know more about once you're in the relationship, and just something to know as you're going into the relationship.
It's just really helpful to know, because either way, whether you have present parents or absent parents, both shape you in really profound ways.
100%. Finally, number 5, what are her views on children and family? Oh, this one's interesting.
Yes. It's good to know from the get-go, as early as you can, what she thinks about family and children. Having children, adopting, interacting with children, thoughts on herself being part of a family someday. These are all things you'll need to be on the same page at some point, and figuring all that out from the get-go is really important.
Yes, because again, we're talking really from the Christian perspective. I've said it before, we're victims of our theology. And so we believe in the value and importance of marriage, but particularly also family. The fact that children are a blessing of the Lord. And so for any man, Christian man, who's looking at a potential woman that he's interested in, one of the things that should be evident in her life is a love for family. Now, it doesn't mean that every woman wants to have, 25 kids, Okay, that's totally fine. But if she's like, I never want to have kids, I never want to be a wife, okay, pause.
Take note.
Yeah, take note. Now, this is important for all of these categories, which is depending upon the context that you have with a potential woman that you're interested in dating, the context will determine the knowledge that you have about her. So for instance, you got Betty and Bob, they grew up with each other. And he's gone over to her house dozens of times. And so guess what? He's going to know a lot about her interests, her values, her beliefs. He's going to know about her family, her relationship to her family. He's got a lot of information there. Whereas maybe a different guy shows up at church, he's a college student, meets a young woman there, not as much context. Or maybe you've got a guy who's, scrolling the internet, Instagram for, a potential spouse. By the way, don't do that. Terrible idea. And all the information that he has is what's in her bio or the videos that she's producing. And so it's much more limited. And so the reality is this: you're not going to have all the information before you start a relationship. And guess what? You're not going to have all the information once in a relationship. And newsflash, you're not going to have all the information once you're married, because once you're married, guess what you're spending the rest of your life doing? Getting to know her, you're actually gaining insight, clarity, and knowledge of her for the rest of your life.
Yeah, this isn't a checklist to complete before you start to move forward.
100%.
And to be clear, we're not suggesting to initiate some awkward questions early on to get these things figured out.
Don't suddenly be like a private eye investigator. Like, that's awkward and weird.
Yes. What you want to go for, what the goal is, to the best that you can, really enter into and navigate all these complexities.
And it's important to note that, attraction does still matter. Because while we've talked about these amazing qualities, and particularly if you have a woman who checks all of those qualities, you might be like, man, I need to pursue her, but I'm just not physically attracted to her. And that's okay. She just may not be the woman for you. Because at the end of the day, physical attraction, while that should not be the lens through which we pursue a relationship, it is an important part of the relationship.
Yes, physical attraction matters, but what a guy needs to keep in mind is that there could be someone he's good friends with, or has a lot of great qualities, but he's not highly attracted to them physically. That's actually okay for a short window of time. Because what happens with guys is that as you get to know somebody, as a guy gets to know a woman, he often becomes more physically attracted to her. But there's this unique window of opportunity that if a guy waits too long and just stays friends with somebody, it actually becomes harder. There becomes this bigger hurdle to cross for him to be attracted. And it's like this familiarity thing. So a guy does not want to wait too long, but recognize that physical attraction can grow.
And many men tend to set very unrealistic standards when it comes to women and what they're looking for. And because of the digital age and our addiction to social media and scrolling, sadly, many men their standards are solely based upon physical attributes. Is she the right height? Is she a certain weight, a certain waist size, a certain hair color, a certain style? Which is at the end of the day just a very objective viewpoint of a woman. And if you only ever look at a woman objectively from, a beauty standard, eventually, guess what? That's going to change. She's going to get older. If you marry her, you'll probably have a family together. And so, 10, 20, 30 years down the road, if you were just objectively polling culture, people would say she's not attractive as she once was. And not to mention, you as the man yourself, your own attraction to her will change. Even if she remained unchanged.
Yeah.
You will change.
It's so true.
But you can speak to this better than I can, but the fact that within relationship and intimacy and marriage, the subjective part of that relationship comes out, where arguably she becomes more attractive the more you live life together.
The amazing thing that happens in a long-term relationship is exactly that. Objective attraction may drop, but the really cool thing is the subjective attraction actually becomes a lot more powerful, and that person actually remains very attractive to you over the long haul.
Which, I mean, we know is, a God-designed thing.
Yeah.
It's almost like there was a creator, and this process by which setting up single men to be able to pursue romantic relationships that lead towards flourishing marriages, it's so important for them to recognize that the reason why those other things matter so much more than just the physical attraction is because it is those things that actually help your marriage and you actually be more attracted to your wife down the road.
Yeah. So when a guy is setting expectations, when he's making a list, so to speak, considering somebody, it's really important for the guy to remain realistic. Are you considering things that should be considered? Are you prioritizing the things that need to be prioritized? Because guys often get it backwards, right? We deprioritize the important things, and we'll often put big emphasis on things that often don't matter.
Yeah, that's so true. So, you're married. Tell me about when you were pursuing your wife. What were those things that you prioritized in your relationship that led you to say, I want to marry her?
So what did I prioritize, or what should I have prioritized? Because those are actually separate things.
Yes.
My future self did not exist back then.
This podcast wasn't around for you to listen to.
It wasn't.
It would have been probably very helpful.
This would have been really helpful. Now, I still would have married her, but I would have had more information to evaluate and to go on. And that can be really helpful as you enter into a relationship, engagement, even into marriage. You can enter into marriage on a really good head start.
Yes.
Or you can kind of get off to a rough start.
Yep.
Yeah, what caught my attention? Things like emotional maturity. Her emotional maturity really stood out to me. She could hold her own in a group of friends, and that might seem like what's the big deal? But how you conduct yourself around peers, around people, is something I took note of. Her relationship with makeup was actually like kind of a big deal to me.
Yeah.
Some women, it's really important to them. Some women have an aversion to it. Not saying that either one, there's a spectrum.
Yes. And as I always like to say, makeup should enhance the natural beauty, not become the beauty.
Exactly. Her family seemed well-grounded.
Yeah.
That was important to me.
Yep.
She had a really good work ethic. And this is a big one. She could speak to me as a friend, even as the relationship started to grow.
Yeah. You talked about that earlier.
Yeah. Even as, feelings and interest,
Yep.
They're there a little bit. Oftentimes people kind of flip-flop into that emotional,
Flirty. Yeah.
and you can stay there for the most part. But she had this ability to just sit and talk as friends. I really appreciated that. And I didn't even have the words to know that that's what I wanted.
Yep.
But it's something you can it's something that I was aware of and able to perceive.
Yeah.
She had a solid upbringing to the best that I could tell. Solid family, parents, siblings. She was raised well, and that meant a lot to me. And here's another important one. How she engaged in and her interest level toward the church. That was something I took notice of. Not right away, but that was something that I became aware of as time went on.
Yeah, totally. Now, were there any other things that you wish you had prioritized in that time?
Well, so if this podcast existed...
And you had been listening to it regularly?
Yes, these are the things I would have liked to have on my radar. How does she engage with children? I actually really didn't have any idea.
Yeah.
What are her thoughts around modesty and attire? What's her relationship with her dad?
Yep.
That's important. How do her mom and dad relate to each other?
Interesting.
That actually has nothing to do with her.
Yeah.
But very influential. Those can be very influential dynamics. What do her parents struggle with? That's a good question to ask.
Yep.
What are her personal habits and routines? And what personal skills has she developed? These are all really good questions for a young guy considering a woman to ask.
I love that. Yeah. So in addition to kind of the major categories that, we examined already, I actually think all of those are so important and would really help men, develop what should they be looking for in a future wife, in a potential spouse. And obviously, we recognize that there, are always unknowns when it comes to, initiating a relationship. And that there may be concerns at the outset before you've even started a relationship. Of course, you can bring those concerns to your authority, to your accountability to process it. But what's important to know is, where do those concerns fall?
Yeah.
Are those concerns, do they fall into the camp of what are essential things that are important, or things that are preferential? Because depending upon where those concerns fall, it's like, yeah, bro, move forward. Absolutely pursue her. So, good standards don't always make good rules.
Exactly.
I think of the example of, you referenced it, a woman and her relationship with her father.
Yeah.
That's a great standard to have, wanting to pursue a woman who's got a great relationship with her dad. But as we've already talked about, unfortunately, the family unit is so broken in the Western world that it's not uncommon that a woman doesn't have a great relationship with her dad, or that her dad's completely absent altogether. So if you're going to use that standard as a rule, many men will miss out on opportunities to pursue amazing women solely because they're holding on to a standard that actually can't be applied as a rule in most cases.
Yeah, and what can actually happen too is that people overcome incredible hardship and difficulty, and they can be better off on the other side of that. And so, yeah, you don't want to miss a really amazing opportunity just because something wasn't there.
Yes, 100%. So as we're concluding here, there are 3 things we want you to walk away this week and do. Number 1 is we want you to write out your list of priorities, of standards. You know, there's been a lot of things we've covered today. A lot of those things can be and should be on your list. If you don't know what you're looking for, remember, you'll fall for anything. We've seen it time and time again. Some of you listening may even have a history where that's the case. And again, with this list, these aren't just, you know, common interests, things that, you guys would like to do together. We're talking values and virtues. We're talking character qualities. So that's number 1. Number 2, you are going to identify those things that are essential, important, and preferential, because not everything on that list should be essential. Not everything on that list should be important. Not everything on that list should be preferential. So you're going to, categorize them. And if you're like, hey, I don't really know which thing should be in which category, well, that leads to step number 3, which is go to your authority, go to your accountability, sit down with them and invite them in to help you figure out which things go in which category. And let me tell you right now, any authority or any accountability would be happy to have this conversation with you. Why? Because they'd much rather have this conversation with you up front than to have a conversation with you down the road where you're already in a relationship, things aren't going great, things are messy, and they've got to step in and try to bring some correction, to try to bring some clarity. So this week, those are the 3 things we want you to do. We're going to see you here next week for an amazing episode. I don't even remember what we're talking about next week.
But it'll be amazing.
It's going to be good. Yeah, I no doubt. And of course, we want to hear from you. So, send us an email to contact@ardentpursuit.fm or, message us on any of our social media apps. And we look forward to seeing you all here next time.